Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're digging into something really fundamental. It's all about unlocking your brain's, well, incredible capacity for creativity, for growth, and innovation. And this isn't just theory. It's practical stuff that can really change how you tap into your own potential. Our deep dive today draws heavily from Jeff Karp's book, LIT. We're going to pull out the key insights, kind of a shortcut, really, a shortcut to understanding the cutting edge science and the actual strategies you can use to become more, let's say, well informed about firing up your full potential.
Exactly. And that's the heart of it, isn't it? The core science, our brains, they're incredibly plastic and malleable.
Oh.
They are like inherently hungry for the right challenge.
Mhm.
And surprisingly, they stay capable of learning new things, sparking creativity even as we get older. This is, our evolutionary inheritance. It's nature's playbook, essentially.
Yeah.
The key is we have to choose to activate those neural networks, the ones that can literally uh, shake our brain awake and push our thinking beyond what we may have imagined possible.
Right. So, our mission here for you listening is to explore these powerful tools, these surprising insights from the book. We want to help you filter out all that noise and distraction that's everywhere these days and overcome inertia to really help you switch on that innate ability you have to focus on what truly matters, even with the cacophony of modern life. Okay, let's unpack this. First up, let's talk about something that sounds simple, maybe, but it's incredibly powerful. It's this idea of falling in love with practice. And we don't just mean like grinding it out, we mean genuinely savoring the joy of getting better bit by bit. What does it actually mean, to fall in love with practice?
Hmm. Well, the neuroscience is genuinely fascinating here. Practice doesn't just make perfect, as they say. It literally muscularizes the brain. When you repeat something, it actually changes the chemistry of the neurons involved. Think about the ends of your neurons, those branches called dendrites. They actually grow new connections, and the existing ones get stronger. So what happens over time is the brain needs lower activation energy for that task. It just feels easier, faster. And there's a neat twist, too. Even taking short breaks from practice, believe it or not, can create a kind of startle effect that actually helps cement the learning when you come back to it.
That's wild. And Jeff Karp's own story is just a perfect example of this, isn't it? He talks about really struggling in elementary school, feeling like he had the attention span of a fruit fly, couldn't process things the usual way. He even said he felt like a human anomaly. But then, through sheer dedicated practice, he used memory techniques. Inspired by people like Nelson Dellis, the memory champion, he just transformed himself. He went from that kid struggling to a top bioengineer, an innovator, fellow of prestigious academies, over 100 patents. I mean,
Wow.
it's an incredible transformation, yeah. And it's not just about sheer willpower.
Mhm.
As you get better through practice, your brain rewards you. It releases neurochemicals like dopamine, serotonin. These make you feel good, boost your motivation. It creates this really powerful positive feedback loop. It's a clear case of discipline breeds discipline, as the saying goes.
So it's really more than just mastering one specific skill then.
Oh, absolutely. It sounds like it's also about cultivating that joy of persistence.
Right.
Overcoming the brain's natural laziness, basically. Like that ant analogy in the book, their persistence is just such a key driver. Do you think understanding the why behind it, knowing like what you are doing for your brain when you practice, makes the reward feel more interesting, more lasting?
I think so. Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. It changes practice from like a chore into a conscious act of, well, brain sculpting. Knowing that even those small, consistent efforts are literally rewiring your brain for
Yeah.
growth, that can be hugely motivating. It makes it something much deeper than just, hitting some target.
That makes a ton of sense. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about breaking out of our routines because our brains, they love that efficient energy saving mode, right? What Karp calls low energy brain or LEBB. It defaults to the simplest, most energy efficient option using habits we've already built. But we need to challenge that sometimes. So our next principle, do new, do different. Ooh, and this is where it gets really interesting, I think.
You're spot on. Efficiency is great, but relying too much on that LEB mode, it actually limits our ability to connect with others. It stops us looking beyond our immediate stuff, and it can even weaken that natural inclination to look inward. To really stay fresh and give you energy, as neuroscientist Rudy Tanzi puts it, your brain actually needs a bit of chaos and disruption. It thrives on novelty, on variety. So maybe ask yourself, how often do you deliberately shake up your own routines? What's the biggest hurdle there for most people, do you think? Inertia.
Yeah, inertia is probably a big one, just the rut of daily life. But this source gives some fantastic examples of how to actively invites surprise, invites serendipity. Like Jeff Karp himself, he deliberately meets new people outside his field. Patent lawyers, manufacturing experts, every few weeks, just to scout ideas, he says, and expand his range of expertise. And then there's Linda Snone, pioneer in tech innovation. She apparently had no particular career plan. She was just guided by her interests, passionate about figuring out how tech could best serve us humans. She was always exploring what was coming up around the corner, kind of maximizing her potential to get lucky. And I was really struck by Karp saying yes to that big TED Talk, even with his deep anxiety about public speaking and memory. He said later it was a very, very important moment of growth. Huge.
Those are great examples because they show real intention, don't they? When you purposefully put yourself in unfamiliar settings or roles, or even do simple things like using your non-dominant hand for a task, you kind of rouse your brain. You override its natural resistance to change. And that stimulates creativity. And yeah, it releases dopamine, rewarding the effort. The book also talks about defamiliarization.
Ah, yeah, defamiliarization.
Which basically means consciously changing your perspective, seeing something familiar in a totally different context.
Right.
Like the example of looking at your thumb, then seeing it as part of a bigger system, a haul-on, just a part of a larger whole. It forces you to rethink connections.
I love that idea, defamiliarization. It really connects to how Karp's lab uses this stuff day to day, right? Tackling these supposedly unsolved medical problems by bouncing between focused and unfocused states and asking these unique questions that act as a kind of pinch. Can you unpack that pinch idea a bit more?
Yeah, the pinch here is it's a question or an observation that's just different enough to jolt you out of your usual thinking patterns. It makes your brain look at something familiar in a completely new light. It's a cognitive nudge, you could say. And this approach has led to some truly amazing bio-inspired solutions in his lab, like surgical glue inspired by slugs.
Yo way.
Yeah. Or a cancer diagnostic tool inspired by jellyfish tentacles, or even water filters based on tree xylem. It's all about intentionally seeking out ways to see problems and solutions differently, thinking way outside the box.
That's incredible stuff. Okay, let's tackle something we all face. Failure. Our culture generally hates it, right? Nobody likes to fail. But as the source points out, failure happens. You get horrendous failures and just more common everyday ones. The real insight, though, is in the process you engage in responding to them. That's the key.
Exactly. Michael Jordan's quote is so powerful here. I've missed more than 9,000 shots. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed.
Wow. It just highlights that, doing good science, or really anything meaningful, requires the determination to keep trying, keep reflecting, keep asking deeper questions, and keep thinking about new ways to approach a problem.
And Diana Nyad's story, just incredible. That endurance swimmer. She failed 4 times trying to swim from Cuba to Florida, faced asthma, jellyfish swarms, massive ones, lightning storms, you name it. But she finally did it on her 5th try at age 64. That's just profound commitment to learning from setbacks.
It really is. And this brings us to Bob Langer mentoring Jeff Karp. So early in Karp's career, he was really struggling to get research grants. Huge pressure. Langer's advice was blunt, but apparently game-changing. It's the grants you get that count.
Simple but effective.
Right. It totally shifted Karp's perspective. He stopped seeing rejections as personal failures. Instead, he saw them as iterative gold, like valuable lessons in how to successfully prepare grant applications. He called it being schooled in grantsmanship. He learned to de-risk his proposals, add backup plans, collaborate more, and eventually he landed major funding. That shift in seeing failure, that's everything. It makes you ask, how do you see your own setbacks? Are they dead ends, or are they learning opportunities?
That reframing is so critical. So the takeaway isn't just don't be afraid to fail. It's that failure is actually a problem-solving tool, a powerful one. The goal isn't necessarily success right out of the gate, but to develop a process for learning through experimentation. The book really pushes for a fail-fast culture, creating a safe zone for failures to spur creativity, maximize learning, and perfection paralysis and nourish collaboration. What does that safe zone actually look like day to day?
Well, a safe zone for failures. It's basically an environment where trying something and maybe not succeeding isn't just tolerated, it's actually encouraged. It's seen as a necessary part of learning. It means you celebrate the lessons learned, not just the wins. It requires leaders, managers, even parents to model this, to say explicitly, mistakes happen, let's figure out what we learned from this. It's the total opposite of cultures that punish every misstep, because those cultures just stifle innovation.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Okay, next up. Humility. The book calls it a core competency and a vital access point for inspiration. Being human, being humble.
Yeah, look at Nobel laureate Maybrit Moser's lab. Their huge success discovering brain cells key for navigation wasn't just about brilliance. It was driven by a culture that emphasized humility as well as excellence. There was no upmanship, just a deep collaborative sensibility. That kind of approach builds more cohesive teams that excel. Why? Because people admit what they don't know. They actively seek out different views instead of just trying to prove they're the smartest one in the room.
And Jeff Karp shares that really candid story about parenting providing some of the most humbling lessons. He realized his scientific expertise, his problem-solving skills, were actually getting in the way, an obstacle when trying to connect with his son about school struggles. He said he had to learn to toss my playbook, just listen without being reactive, and appreciate his kids as they grow, not force his own ideas on them. That's a big lesson for any of us who think we've got it all figured out, isn't it?
It really is. It just underscores how important it is to acknowledge what you don't know and to actively seek out people who know more than you or think differently. This helps overcome what the economist Robert Shiller calls errors of human judgment and excessive trust in experts, even ourselves. The book suggests that maximizing opportunities for a bruised ego can actually be lit. It can lead to exciting shifts because it forces you to see your limits and find insights you wouldn't have otherwise.
And this idea of humility, it connects so deeply with other wisdom traditions too, like Elder Dave Corchin's indigenous teachings, linking humility directly to our place in nature, seeing ourselves as only one part of the web of life, interconnectedness. And Lynn Twist's work in philanthropy. She shifted from that old charity model to co-equal partnerships by learning to leave her preconceived ideas and assumptions at the door and just genuinely listen to communities. So what does this practically mean for how you interact with people, with the world? How do we practice this kind of humility?
I think it means consciously choosing to step back sometimes. Instead of always being the expert with the answers, lean into being the learner. Ask real questions, listen actively without judging, value different perspectives, especially the ones that challenge your own views. It's about recognizing that often true strength comes from admitting vulnerability and seeing how we depend on each other.
That's powerful. Okay, in this crazy fast world, it's so easy to get caught in the urgency of now, right? Constant stimulation, constant demands. So, our next principle is about prioritizing unhurried play, solitude, and silence. Protecting time to recharge your spirit. It's about pressing pause.
And there's neuroscience behind this too. It relates to something called the default mode network, the DMN. For a while, people thought it was just like neural noise or mind wandering when you weren't focused. But newer research suggests it's more like a playlist, a continuous review process the brain uses to keep memory, meaning, projections, and possibilities in constant play. It actually holds great potential for gaining insight due to random connections bubbling up. So learning to shift your attention with intention, that directly taps this hardwired capacity. And like Anne Lamott said, almost everything will work again if you unplug it for a few minutes, including you. So true.
Jeff Karp tells that great story about the pinch. Remember that? Observing a bat in his backyard as a kid just snagged his attention. And it wasn't a distraction. It brought him this focused, calm, energized state. He felt like it was a superpower for redirecting his attention, especially with his ADHD. What's actually happening in the brain during a pinch like that?
Well, that pinch can trigger physiological responses. Things like functional hyperkalemia, which is just increased blood flow to the brain regions that are active right then. And it activates the locus coeruleus, an area really important for focusing attention. So your brain is literally getting more fuel delivered to the right spots. These kinds of restorative breaks, they're essential for effective self-regulation. They let the brain consolidate information, process those inner signals, gut feelings.
Yeah.
It's not just passive rest, it's active mental processing happening quietly.
The source also mentions how even those big, unintended pauses like the pandemic became pivot points for a lot of people, a chance to re-engage with new intention. I was really interested in the Bob Langer story, Karp's mentor again. He apparently invented these biodegradable, elastic-shaped memory polymers while he was on an exercise bike just reading a magazine for fun. He'd pushed pause on his regular work, but his mind was still engaged just differently. Restoratively. That wasn't work, but look what came out of it.
Exactly. It really speaks to the importance of self-awareness, learning to read the cues from within about when you need those breaks. This practice helps you figure out what resonates with or inspires you and lights your spirit. It lets you choose a more conscious cadence for your life instead of just getting swept along.
Okay, now for something that feels a bit counterintuitive maybe, getting bothered. Identifying what truly bothers you, seeing pain points not as things to run from, but as traction for action, as powerful motivators to wake up to what you want.
Yeah, pain points aren't just metaphorical. They're described as pure, palpable energy. Energy that can keep your motivation high, ignite a spark for others, and even build momentum for problem solving on a wider scale. In Jeff Karp's lab, apparently they're constantly asking what are the pain points, and also the so what question. This helps them define their targets and make sure their innovations actually have the greatest positive impact. They're literally using discomfort to drive progress.
That's such a practical, grounded approach. Like the story of James Ankrum, despite all his academic success, he felt adrift until the very real personal pain point of his father's death helped him find a clear direction for his career developing better medical therapies. It's a very personal example of that principle working.
It is. And you can connect this to broader issues too, like Bishop Marion Budd advising people to stay proximate to those who are suffering the most. Because that boots-on-the-ground proximity, she argues, provides a much deeper energy source for social justice work than just reading about it from afar. Similarly, Linda Stone's career choices at Apple and Microsoft. Driven by her own pain point, wanting to work only on things she truly cares about concerning our relationship with technology, she knew what bothered her, and she followed that.
And Karp talks about his own struggles with ADHD and work addiction, how becoming more sensitive to those inner cues, his biometrics he calls them, helped him tell the difference. The difference between genuine burnout and just like a lack of motivation for that specific thing, which allowed him to push through when needed, to feel energized by the things he was passionate about. It really boils down to recognizing your own bothered awareness, doesn't it? Whether it's a habit you hate, a relationship issue, a problem in your community.
Yes. The next step is crucial. To apply this, you need to actively look around, connect the dots, engage with intention. Choose new responses instead of falling back on old habits. Then connect with your own power. Embrace that motivation you've identified. And finally, be transparent about what you're trying to do. That transparency can inspire others. It's all about taking that initial friction, that bothered feeling, and turning it into sustained forward motion.
Okay, finally, let's zoom out a bit. Let's talk about collective action. Karp makes the point that we are all in this shared creative challenge now. We are world making, and we can make it a lit world. It's about how our individual actions can spark something bigger.
And this really starts with the power of one, doesn't it? Like Reginald Shufford's story. He went from being labeled a troublemaker kid to becoming a civil rights lawyer. And that change was deeply influenced by teachers, by his mother, people who believed in him. He advocates starting closer to home, connecting with local groups, recognizing the huge power of just one person encouraging another. That can ripple outwards.
Abigail Dillon from Earth Justice makes a similar point. She says, we underestimate the power of contribution of acting within our own sphere of influence to tackle the piece of the problem that is right in front of us. That really lands for me. Because huge global problems can feel so overwhelming, right? But focusing on your own sphere, that feels doable, actionable.
It does. And think about how society itself can shift. There was that national study of learning mindsets. It found that teaching kids for just 1 hour that their intelligence isn't fixed, that can be developed with effort. That significantly improved their grades later on. It connects to Ken Robinson's idea, the key is not to standardize education, but to personalize it. Believing in potential makes a difference.
And the Oakland Museum of California example is so inspiring. Lisa Sasaki led this transformation. They went from being this kind of isolated institution to a buzzing community hub. How? By literally bringing down the walls, listening to what the community actually needed and wanted. Those Friday nights at OMCA events became huge successes, creating shared space, real conversation. That's a daring, caring culture in action.
It really is. And, the response to the COVID-19 pandemic, as difficult as it was, also showed us something powerful about collective problem solving on a global scale. We saw incredibly rapid development of vaccines, masks, therapies. It demonstrated this constellation of energies that can build immense momentum when we face a shared threat or goal. It definitely raises a big question, though. How can we harness that kind of collaborative energy, that urgency, for other major global challenges we're facing now?
That's the crucial question, I think. And all of this, it seems to culminate in this idea of compassion as empathy lit. It's not just understanding someone else's situation, but actively using that understanding, transforming that energy to actually make a difference. Jeff Karp talks about practicing compassion skill building in his own meetings, consciously muting his inner critic, really focusing on others, recognizing that when someone brings their passion forward for a cause, others want to join in and help. It creates this enormous gravity, this momentum. So, wrapping up our deep dive into LAT, it really shows that your brain is absolutely designed for incredible growth, for innovation. You are like inherently equipped to adapt, to advance your efforts in fresh new ways, often just by understanding and working with your brain's natural tendencies, not against them.
And remember, this isn't just about personal gain or self-improvement in isolation. It's about providing you with real tools. Tools to activate your own evolutionary potential, yes, but also to contribute to building a more daring, caring culture, to be part of active world-making.
So, to leave you with a final thought, something to maybe chew on for your own continued deep dive, consider this wisdom from James Clear. He wrote, "It is better to be limited by what you can dream for yourself than by where you fit in someone else's dream." What does that truly mean for your unique journey? What stories will you choose to tell yourself and tell the world about your own potential? Now go forth and get lit.